I knew this place had turned into a clown rodeo the second I heard my name followed by a goddamn whistle. Not a Slack ping. Not a hey, can we talk? No, an actual dog whistle. Kyle stood there at the front of our morning stand-up, grinning like a discount Tex warlord, eyes lit up like he'd just reinvented the concept of condescension. Melanie, he barked, I shit you not, sit. Stay, let's see if you're trainable. I coffee burned going down, but not as bad as the pride he tried to torch in front of the junior devs. I've been here 2 decades. 20 years of navigating spaghetti code, server meltdowns, and budget slashes so severe they made Flint water look filtered. I've rebooted our backend from the ashes more times than this man's probably rebooted his router. But sure, Kyle, let's play fetch with my dignity. He wore his ignorance like cologne, strong, offensive. No one had the balls to tell him it stank. Fresh from some consulting gig where he probably bullied interns into calling him a thought leader, he landed here with a six-figure swagger and zero knowledge of our infrastructure. First day on the job, he walked into the war room and called our core platform crusty, but cute, like it was a damn Etsy trinket. Now here's the part where Reddit expects me to say I stormed out or filed a complaint. But no, I smiled. I took notes. I gave him the same nod I give my cat when she knocks over a glass just to test gravity. Because there's something you learn after 2 decades of being underestimated. Silence is the sound of the trap being baited. Look, if you've made it this far and you're not already following, come on, do me and the team a solid and hit that follow button. 97% of y'all listen without subscribing, and it's starting to feel like I'm explaining legacy code to Kyle all over again, painful without support. Your sub keeps the wine flowing and the chaos coming. Back to Kyle. By week 2, he had implemented something he called agile conditioning, which, surprise, surprise, was just micromanagement with a dog park theme. Fetch the JIRA ticket. Roll over that sprint estimate. Good dev. If someone would have thrown him a tennis ball, I swear he'd have chased it into traffic. He loved humiliating me in front of the team. Legacy knowledge is a liability. He'd smirk, like the system I kept duct taped together with cron jobs and caffeine was some old dog that needed to be put down. I didn't flinch. Just kept logging, archiving, and sinking my side of the story into the shadows. You see, while Kyle was busy gamifying our death spiral, I was quietly building an arc. Then came the sprint scoreboard. I shit you not. He mounted a laminated leaderboard in the common room with glittery stars for velocity wins and frowny stickers for missed stand-ups, like we were in some twisted Montessori hell. I got 3 frownies in a week for not clapping loud enough during his retrospective presentations. But here's the kicker. While he was busy gluing googly eyes onto Kanban cards, I noticed something odd and prod. A backend update. Undocumented. Pushed straight to master through admin credentials. The file name? Test payload Kyle01. JS real stealthy, like signing a murder confession in Comic Sans. And guess whose email token approved it? That's right, our fearless pack leader. It wasn't just bad code. It was a ticking goddamn landmine. Inside was an encrypted payload talking to a weird endpoint, a hostname that looked familiar, like deja vu in URL form. I traced it once, then twice. And on the third pass, I damn near dropped my coffee. The IP was registered to a holding shell out of Delaware, tied to our oldest competitor, the one Kyle always forgot to mention when boasting about his networking events. That's when I knew. Kyle hadn't just insulted my intelligence, he'd handed me the match, poured the gasoline, and tied himself to the chair. All I had to do was smile and wait for the smoke to reach the alarms. The next few weeks were a slow-motion car crash, the kind where you're sipping black coffee while the airbags deploy in agonizing real time. Kyle didn't just push me out of major features, he banished me to the codebase equivalent of janitorial work. Triage Queen, he called me once in a stand-up, like it was some kind of honor. I smiled like it was, and I went back to sorting through bug reports written by interns who still thought Stack Overflow was a dating site. Every time there was a major architecture meeting, I wasn't just uninvited, I was actively ignored. I'd catch whispers outside the glass meeting rooms. My name would float by in phrases like we're modernizing or she's better used downstream. Downstream? That's corporate for dump her in the trench and pretend she's plumbing. And then came the board. Kyle's pride and joy. A 6-foot dry erase scoreboard installed near the kitchenette where everyone microwaved their sadness. Across the top it said, squad goals written in glitter marker like a teenage hostage situation. Below were our names, slapped on laminated name tags, and next to each, stars, stickers, and color-coded agility scores. Stars for closing tickets. Demerits for being off mission. I got a lightning bolt sticker for snark in sprint comments. No one knew what the hell that even meant, including the dev who gave it to me. It was humiliating and brilliant. Because while everyone else was distracted, scrambling to level up in Kyle's fever dream Hunger Games, I was peeling back the tape on something darker. One morning, buried in a cascade of triage tickets no one else wanted, I saw it again. Test payload Kyle01. JS it had been touched, modified actually. A new timestamp, same file name, but this time a different SHA hash, which meant it was changed after the initial commit. I ran a diff, the original code was suspicious, a passive data pinger. The new version, it was active. It wasn't just logging user behavior anymore, it was sending it, live in batches, compressed and encrypted, to the same weird-ass endpoint I'd flagged before. The file name hadn't changed. The signature hadn't changed either. And the commit log, proved by Kyle D. Ramsey at companyname.com, used his full email, even his initials in the metadata field. The guy practically monogrammed his own crime scene. Now I wasn't just annoyed. I was suspicious with a side of full-blown investigative rage. This wasn't a simple screw-up. This was a breach. Maybe intentional, maybe not. But he owned it. Legally, digitally, verifiably. So I did what any legacy engineer raised on duct tape and paranoia would do. I backed that shit up twice. I started building a folder, just in case, I told myself, encrypted, air-gapped, stashed on a drive that hadn't touched the company VPN since Obama was in office. Every commit, every timestamp, every Slack message he sent using Synergy unironically, I saved it all, because something wasn't right. That test file was being pinged by real users. Real data was moving, and Kyle was walking around like a man who thought encryption was a brand of shampoo. I opened up the payload again. Nested deep inside was a strange endpoint, Analytics Insight Track Biz. I did a who is search. Registrant, Trekken Digital Solutions. That's when my stomach dropped, because Trekken used to be our biggest competitor. Emphasis on used to, before we outpaced them 2 years ago. And now, buried in the code my director pushed to prod, was a live data stream pointing straight into their backyard. Was it a mistake, a lapse, or was Kyle, our motivational poster of a leader, handing them user behavior metrics on a silver goddamn platter? I didn't know yet, but I knew where to start. I logged off early that day. Didn't say goodbye, didn't even fake an interest in Kyle's afternoon Scrum and Sundays meeting. At home, I poured a glass of bourbon, opened a fresh file named Doghouse Evidence, and typed the first line, Kyle Ramsey. 04/17, approved payload, endpoint, Trekken. I smiled, not the happy kind, this dumbass signed his own indictment kind. The leash was getting shorter. The moment Kyle called me out in front of the whole dev team, I knew he was cornered. Cornered people bite, or in his case, bark like hell. It started with a string of mobile crashes, nothing catastrophic, just a weird memory leak tied to certain user behaviors. Happened maybe once every 100 sessions, but clients started noticing. One even tweeted a screenshot of the crash with the caption, "Cool app if you enjoy spontaneous combustion." Kyle's response? Turn the bug into a witch hunt. And guess who he threw in the river first? Melanie's our legacy expert, he said during Monday's stand-up, pacing like a deranged gym teacher. Legacy code causes legacy problems. He didn't even look at me when he said it. Just tapped the whiteboard like it owed him money, circling error codes in red Sharpie while the interns nodded like cult members. I could feel the eyes, half of them pity, the other half relief it wasn't them. The worst part wasn't the blame, it was the performance. Kyle was a theater kid who never got cast, so now he acts out his revenge fantasies in corporate meetings. He called an emergency all hands, made us sit in that airless glass conference room with those brittle-ass chairs, and then told me just me to stand. "Stand up, Melanie," he said like we were in court. I stood. He clicked to the crash report slide dramatically like he was revealing the results of a paternity test. This is what happens when people don't evolve, when they refuse to heal. Heal. I didn't blink, didn't speak. Just nodded slowly, pulled out my notebook, and started writing. Not code, not defense. Documentation for the eventual autopsy. You don't survive 20 years in a collapsing SAW ecosystem without learning to recognize a death spiral, and Kyle's had officially begun. After the meeting, I went straight to my desk. Not to fix the bug, hell no, to dissect it. I ran the crash logs through our internal tools, filtering for anomalies. Found a pattern almost immediately. Every crash traced back to the same sequence. A user accessed a rarely triggered onboarding flow, which triggered an unexpected data call, which triggered the crash. But buried in the call stack, 6 layers deep, was something that made me freeze. Post/API/data/pipe/track, source equals track and user, not our domain. Not even in our ecosystem. That endpoint didn't resolve to any of our services. I traced the address. DNS lookup spat out an IP out of Dallas. Then I followed the trail through 3 proxy layers and finally landed on an AWS bucket tagged Insight Behavioral, with a billing address matching, you guessed it, Trekken Digital Solutions. This wasn't just a rogue test file anymore. This was a live, intentional data siphon, cloaked inside a payload Kyle signed, buried in an onboarding flow, silently scraping user interactions and relaying them to a competitor under a disguised API header. And the best part? Every call to that endpoint showed up in our logs. Every one of those calls had a stacked trace, and every trace contained the exact same corrupted memory address causing the crash. Which meant the crash wasn't just a bug. It was the consequence of the siphon. Kyle had effectively hotwired our mobile app to commit corporate espionage and built the crash with his own damn hands. Now, if you're expecting some cinematic showdown where I marched into the CEO's office waving screenshots, you've mistaken me for a rookie. I didn't say a word. Not to Kyle, not to HR, not even to the one dev who still brought me coffee out of pity. Instead, I opened a new doc titled Smoking GUN, pasted the stack trace, highlighted the foreign API endpoint, cross-referenced it with the test payload Kyle 01, JS commit. Then I set a calendar reminder for 30 days out because Kyle wasn't ready to fall yet. But the foundation? Oh, it was rotting beautifully. Let him have his stars and his sprints. I was just getting started. The endpoint looked harmless at first glance, obfuscated domain, vanilla syntax, no red flags unless you knew what to look for. But I've spent 20 years swimming in the septic tank of bad code and worse intentions. And this one stank like day-old rotisserie chicken left in a June parking lot. I cracked it open one layer at a time. The IP address, registered under a shell called Orion Consults, LLC, generic, forgettable. Except when I ran it through a skip trace engine I still had access to from a freelance gig years back, it popped up on a legal doc filed out of Delaware. Owner, Peter Haverson, former CTO of Trekken Digital Solutions. There it was, in plain black and white. Kyle hadn't just shipped crap code. He'd opened a tunnel between our user base and our most notorious competitor using a company that didn't even exist 6 months ago. I leaned back in my chair, one eyebrow twitching. The kind of facial expression HR would call insubordination, and my mother used to call loaded gun patience. It wasn't speculation anymore, it was fact. Confirmed, timestamped, and legally admissible. The real cherry, I went back to the Git logs, every merge request, every comment, every push. The commit with the leak pushed at 3:17 a.m., 2 days before our quarterly demo, merged manually, no code review, no QA sign-off. Merge token, crams 3 Y director, that's Kyle's personal token. You only get one, it's your digital fingerprint. So unless Kyle suddenly lent his token to a raccoon with a grudge, the bastard did it himself. Was it ignorance, negligence, or malice wrapped in buzzwords and covered in trust-fall team-building exercises? Didn't matter. Intent is for courtrooms. I was playing a different game. I backed everything up twice. One copy went on a password-protected flash drive I tucked into a hollowed-out copy of Scrum for Dummies on my bookshelf. The other got encrypted with a randomly generated key and uploaded to a dead-drop server I hadn't touched since the Equifax breach. And then I did something radical. I stopped trying to fix the bug. For weeks I'd been triaging, optimizing, tweaking code paths to reduce memory footprint and eliminate leaks. But now that I knew the source of the rot, I let it fester. Not out of laziness, out of strategy. Because that bug was a flare. A distress signal. Digital scream that something inside the app was bleeding out. And every crash report it generated was another breadcrumb leading straight back to Kyle's dumbass payload. I turned off autofix scripts, ignored the tickets, didn't even glance at the stacked traces unless I needed a timestamp. Kyle noticed, started sending me 3 a.m. Slack messages, passive-aggressive little hackus like, any update on the mobile issue? Users still reporting crashes. Thoughts. Teams counting on you. Let's be rock stars. I left him on read. The next sprint, he upped the ante, assigned me 9 bugs with 24-hour deadlines, all labeled critical, each one conveniently tied to the crash I just stopped investigating. I moved them to the backlog and labeled them under review. He started slapping stars on other people's names on the sprint board. Gave an intern a $10 Starbucks gift card for initiative after they submitted a hotfix to a CSS alignment issue. Meanwhile, he erased my name from the top velocity column entirely. Did I care? Hell no. I was past the point of pride, past caring about optics, past fighting the daily battles when I already had the launch codes for the war. It felt good, clean, even, to know I wasn't crazy. That all the whispers, all the red flags, all the condescension and dismissal and dog-themed mic drops had finally crystallized into something real. Proof, and with that proof came something else. Resolve. I opened my laptop, looked at the crash stats, watched them tick upward. I didn't flinch, because the higher they climbed, the louder the alarm got. And I wanted the whole building to hear it when the walls finally came crashing down. It started with 3 crashes an hour, then 10. By the end of the week, we're hitting 27 crashes per hour, all from a single platform, Android, mostly mid-range phones running the latest update. The support team's Slack lit up like a slot machine with customer tickets tagged urgent, fatal error, and my personal favorite. Why does your app hate my phone? Internally, it was beautiful. Externally, it was a full-blown PR grease fire. Kyle called an emergency town hall, his voice 3 octaves higher than usual, pacing the room like a raccoon on Adderall. He waved around a printed Excel sheet showing crash trends like it was a treasure map to the apocalypse. This is unacceptable, he said, jabbing his finger at a projected graph that looked like a middle finger to user experience. These bugs are critical and someone is clearly asleep at the wheel. Everyone knew who someone was. He didn't say my name, didn't have to, just kept calling it a legacy oversight. The man loved that word. Legacy said it like he was spitting out a hair. I stayed quiet. Sat in the second row, notebook in hand, nodding like I was a particularly obedient golden retriever. Yes, Kyle, we should definitely run an integrity audit. Excellent idea. My tone, honey, my eyes, razor blades, because what Kyle didn't know was that I'd already been running audits. Quietly, thoroughly, strategically. See, every time the app crashed, it generated a stack trace. That's standard. But I started customizing those traces just a hair, injecting unique log IDs, seemingly random alphanumeric codes that looked like debug fluff to the untrained eye. They weren't random. Each one was a hash, a digest pointing directly to the payload file he'd committed. I salted them with Kyle's own merge token, Cram's 3Y director, and let them propagate like mold behind the wallpaper. These weren't just logs, they were breadcrumbs, immutable, indexed, stored off-site, cross-referenced by date, time, and git hash. And if you knew how to read the codebase like a map, they led to one conclusion: Kyle pushed the crash, not me. At the same time, I began sanitizing my own footprint. Not erasing it, no, that's what guilty people do. I made my commits squeaky clean with explanatory comments, test coverage reports, even unnecessary documentation. I looked like the goddamn poster child of responsible engineering. Kyle, his commits were like a frat party in code form, missing comments, weird merge times, reckless approvals. The difference was glaring, and I made sure it stayed that way. Then the complaints started flooding in. Clients weren't just annoyed, they were pissed. Some started pulling out of /B tests. One large B2B client sent a terse email to sales: "We're freezing renewals until this is resolved." But the real moment came on a Wednesday afternoon when an investor, our biggest early-stage VC, threatened to yank their remaining tranche of funding unless the tech debt issue was resolved. Kyle panicked. He stomped into our pod like a toddler in a crisis diaper, demanding full accountability and radical transparency, which in Kyle speak meant, "Melanie needs to fix this before I get fired." I nodded. "Again, I'm on it, Kyle," I said sweetly. "I'll need full commit access and override permissions for log injection." He granted them without reading the fine print, just waved his phone in the air and said, "Whatever it takes." Oh, it was going to take everything, all right. With those permissions, I crafted the final layer of the trap. I added a logging module, one that appeared innocuous, just another analytics shim for crash diagnostics. But inside, it contained a trace function that checked for a specific combination of request headers and payload behaviors. When triggered, it would dump the entire stack trace, user session, and API call log into a private audit file named audit KDRM fallback log KDRM. Kyle D. Ramsey. I didn't name it that out of spite. I named it that so when forensic engineers eventually found it, it followed the initials like a bloodhound on a scent trail. Every entry, every crash, every trace, it all pointed to him. I even wrote a private note in the header comments, tucked between two dummy lines of code. "If you're reading this, it means the bastard finally choked on his own Kool-Aid. Enjoy." By the time Friday rolled around, Kyle was sweating through his Everlane button-downs, holding 4 different stand-ups a day, and whisper-screaming into Zoom calls with the CTO like a man trying to plug a leak in a submarine with duct tape and lies. Me, I took my full lunch break for the first time in 5 years, sat outside, ate a sandwich, watched 2 pigeons fight over a Dorito, and felt more peace than I had in months, because the app was still crashing. The breadcrumbs were multiplying, and the wolves, they were finally starting to sniff the air. It was the quiet ones who always saw it first. Not Kyle, of course. He was too busy Googling crisis leadership and sweating into his keyboard like the Titanic's deck crew Googling how to patch a hull breach with hope. No, the first crack didn't come from above. It came from Martin. Martin was a mid-level security analyst who looked like someone's kid brother had wandered into the SOC team and never left. Soft-spoken, oversized hoodie, lived on Mountain Dew and spite. Everyone underestimated him, including Kyle, who once called him the IT guy in front of the board. Martin didn't say much, but when he pinged the internal channel with this message, it was like a gun going off in an opera house. "Anyone know why crash logs are pinging an IP not in our domain whitelist? Looks like outbound post to 44.239.8. 8.176. Cross-referencing source now. No emojis, no dramatics, just a line of digital TNT. Within the hour, the CTO had quietly joined the thread. And by day's end, I got the invite. Subject, logs review discreet from CTO at company time, 6:42 p.m. The message was 2 lines long. "Melanie would appreciate your insight walking through recent crash patterns. No pressure, just clarity." That's how you knew shit was serious. CTOs don't use phrases like "no pressure" unless they're already gripping the panic button under the desk. I showed up the next morning with my best cardigan and my calmest expression, played the role of loyal foot soldier to perfection. We sat in a glass box conference room with the blinds drawn and the lights too bright. CTO had his laptop open, fingers steepled like he was trying to pray the truth into existence. "Walk me through what you've seen," he said. So I did. I walked him through the logs, my version of the logs. A curated journey through stacked traces, API calls, and innocuous errors. Nothing criminal, just suspicious. I made sure every breadcrumb led close to Kyle's signature without ever fully connecting the dots. Like I'd just noticed things, like I was just trying to help. "Oh yeah, that commit?" I flagged it internally, but figured Kyle had cleared it. I didn't want to overstep. "Oh, that endpoint? Weird, right? Probably just legacy scaffolding. But it's odd it's still live memory leak." I assumed that was caused by a recent merge. I didn't have visibility on approvals. Each phrase carefully sculpted to imply one of two things. Either Kyle was negligent or he was malicious. I didn't accuse, I invited inference. And the CTO, he inferred hard. He nodded slowly, took notes, asked no follow-ups. His silence told me everything. He wasn't just auditing the logs. He was auditing me, watching how I answered, how I didn't flinch, how I showed just enough concern to appear invested but not enough to seem complicit. He closed the laptop. Thanks, Melanie. This has been clarifying. I smiled like I'd just gotten a dental cleaning. No problem at all. Happy to help. Then I stood, shook his hand, and went straight back to my desk and submitted my resignation. Subject line, transition planning effective immediately body. Hi, Kyle. I wanted to let you know I'll be stepping away. This last quarter's been a lot, and after 20 years, I think I've hit my burnout ceiling. I'll ensure a clean transition. Happy to hand off triage logs or documentation as needed. No hard feelings. Just time. All the best, Melanie. I CC'd HR. I didn't CC the CTO. Didn't need to. I left my badge on my desk. Left my laptop with the power cord wrapped neatly. Cleared my personal effects. 3 succulents, a half-dead bonsai, and a coffee mug that said 404. Motivation not found. No speeches. No scene. No fireworks. I just left. By 3 p.m., I was on my porch, barefoot, sipping a glass of Pinot Noir while my neighbor's dog barked at a squirrel like it owed him money. The war was no longer mine to fight. Because now they were the ones pulling the logs, reading the commits, following the breadcrumb trail I'd sown like seeds in freshly turned dirt. And Kyle? Kyle was still inside that glass building, trapped under fluorescent lights and self-delusion. Tick, tick, boom. The email came in at 2:14 a.m. because of course it did. That's when guilt blooms. That's when rats start looking for lifeboats. Subject, need your help urgent. Hey Melanie, I know things have been tense. I probably haven't said it enough, but I really respected your work. There's been some confusion around the mobile crashes and a few data flags, and I could really use your insight. Just one more time. You're the only one who really gets the back end. If you help me clean this up, I'll make sure leadership sees it. I think it's time we talk about that senior director title. Please, I'm asking this as a friend. Kyle, no emojis, no stars, no glitter markers, just desperation typed through clenched teeth and empty promises. Didn't respond, didn't even open the full message. Just previewed it in the notification shade while my phone sat on the kitchen counter, face up next to a half-eaten croissant and the bottle of Pinot I never finished. And right there I knew, Kyle was finally hearing the echoes of his own footsteps. The next morning the wolves arrived. A polite woman from legal called it a preliminary compliance inquiry. Everyone else knew it for what it was, the beginning of a federal audit. One had filed a whistleblower complaint, a serious one. Allegations, unauthorized user data transfer, improper encryption of PII, potential corporate espionage. An investigator from the Dodge Office of Cybersecurity knocked on the glass door by lunchtime. 2 men in gray suits followed him in. HR flinched like someone had yanked the fire alarm. And Kyle? He vanished into conference room C like a ghost that knew the seance was about to get personal. The board wasn't subtle. They called an emergency meeting that afternoon. No smiles, no catered lunch. Just water bottles, legal pads, and a vibe so tense it made the oxygen feel heavy. The CFO started piecing it together, the rogue code, the competitor's IP address, the rising crash rate, the investor pullout, the metadata trail. Because see, that's the beauty of digital crime, it always leaves fingerprints. And Kyle, in all his fragile brilliance, had left his smeared all over the crime scene. Every push he made, every commit he authorized, every Slack message he sent talking about fast-tracking data optimization, it was all there. In the logs, in the backups, in the very codebase he had turned into a landmine. And at the center of it, one line of metadata. Uploader ID, CRAM's 3Y director timestamp. April 17th, 3:17 a.m. IP 192.82.54.22, VPN, disabled, no ambiguity. No shared tokens, no plausible deniability. Just Kyle in his own damn handwriting. They grilled him, of course, for hours. He tried to throw me under the bus, I'm sure of it. Probably claimed I was bitter, unstable, resistant to change. But the logs don't lie, the logs don't take sides. And the logs, well, the logs had teeth. I spent the day in silence, away from screens, with my phone face down and my doorbell unplugged. Not smug, not even satisfied, just done. Vindicated, sure, but I didn't need applause. Didn't want revenge montages or a LinkedIn post full of self-congratulatory hashtags. I just wanted peace. The sound of birds, the hum of the neighbor's lawnmower, a porch that didn't smell like recycled air and ego. Somewhere in a high-rise, Kyle was pacing, sweating, explaining things to people who didn't blink when he said words like synergy and sandbox environments. And me? I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, opened a new book, let the silence stretch long enough to feel like healing. The trap was never personal, it was precision, and it had finally snapped shut. They say the boardroom lights flickered when they loaded the logs onto the projector. Not because of the voltage, but because karma short-circuits everything eventually. Emergency board meeting. 9 a.m. sharp, security badges checked. Phones confiscated at the door. One of the VPs said it felt like being summoned to a war tribunal with catered muffins. At the head of the table sat the CTO, pale and tight-lipped, legal on his right, compliance on his left. A big black screen behind them waited to detonate. Kyle shuffled in last. No blazer, no smug smile. Just a dress shirt he'd clearly sweated through on the train and eyes so red-rimmed they looked allergic to consequence. The CTO opened with one sentence. We've completed the internal audit of the crash issue. Then he hit play. The screen flickered, and there it was, the code history. Line by line, commit by commit, date stamped, time stamped, geotagged, the crash payload, the encrypted data stream, the buried endpoint pointing to Trekken, the calls to analytics inside TrackBiz, injected API that rerouted user sessions into the hands of a competitor. Kyle's name on every merge, Kyle's token on every push, Kyle's device ID on every signature. No interpretation needed, just facts, and right in the middle of the stack trace between function calls and session handlers, the logging module kicked in my module, the breadcrumb logs, custom-coded, silent, invisible to standard audits. They lit up like Christmas. Each one carried a unique hash. Each hash matched a commit tied to Kyle's activity. The CTO clicked through them like a slow-motion death march. The room, silent except for the occasional shifting of weight and the one exec who kept coughing into her elbow like it could distract from the carnage. Kyle tried to speak halfway through. It was a miscommunication. I was told those endpoints were temporary. I thought we were integrating in a /B vendor. I didn't know. The CTO didn't look up. Did you review the code before merging? Kyle flinched. Well, not personally. I delegated your token, your laptop, your signature. It was a team effort. The rest of the team declined access. Melanie reported anomalies 3 weeks prior. You overrode her flags. That's when Kyle knew it was over. He sat down hard, like his spine had given up defending him. One of the board members leaned forward. So the crashes, they weren't a bug? The CTO shook his head. No. They were a memory leak caused by an unauthorized payload transmitting encrypted user data to an unvetted endpoint. The system wasn't breaking, it was warning us. The bug was never a bug, it was a fuse, dead silence. One board member stood and walked out. Another took off his glasses and muttered something about liability insurance. Kyle stared at the screen. Like if he looked long enough, the truth would pixelate into something more forgiving. But it didn't. Immutable means immutable. Meanwhile, across town, I sat at my kitchen counter in fuzzy socks, slicing up a pear, watching my cat attempt to destroy a houseplant for no reason beyond pure chaos. The TV was off. Laptop closed. No messages. No alerts, just peace. I didn't need to see it. I'd already lived it. That boardroom wasn't for me. That truth wasn't mine to deliver. I'd planted the fuse, lit the match, and walked away. And now, it was burning just fine without me. The feed was grainy, like it knew it wasn't supposed to exist. Some intern had leaked the internal compliance briefing, probably sent it to their friend who knew someone who knew someone who liked gossip more than job security. By the time it reached me, it had passed through 5 proxies and been downloaded as an unlisted stream on some obscure server in Bulgaria. I wasn't even going to watch it. But then I saw the thumbnail. Kyle, mid-sentence, eyes wild, tie loose like it was trying to escape his neck. Click, a conference table. The CEO at the helm, posture stiff, eyes already narrowed. The compliance officer's voice filtered through the tinny speakers like prophecy. You've completed the external confirmation through federal channels. The API endpoint used to siphon data is registered under a holding company managed by Trekken Digital's former CTO. Metadata from the commits confirm the following. He tapped a button. A window opened on screen behind him, raw log data scrolling like gospel. All evidence points to direct authorization by Director Kyle Ramsey. Merge token is non-transferable. IP logs tied to his issued device. File hashes show no tampering. There is no evidence of framing. A pause. The CEO stared at the feed like it had slapped him. You're absolutely sure? He asked, barely above a whisper. Legal counsel leaned forward, eyes half-lidded and merciless. If this reaches the SEC before we act, the company becomes complicit. Next steps, immediate suspension. Internal email to staff, external statement pending. The CEO turned to Kyle. Effective now, you're relieved of all responsibilities. Access revoked. Please wait outside. Kyle didn't move. His mouth opened, closed. Nothing came out, no bark, no whimper. Just that vacant stare of a man who walked into the forest thinking he was the hunter only to find the bear had a lawyer. He stood, slow, like gravity was punishing him personally. And then the screen froze. I didn't need to see more. I closed the laptop. Exhaled through my nose. A knock at the door. I opened it, wine, sushi, and a manila envelope with no return address, just a bold black stamp. Confidential DOJ, I brought it all inside. Poured the wine, fed the cat. Let the sushi warm just slightly, the way I like it. No music, no screens, no need, just me, my life, my peace. There'd be interviews ahead, sure. A whistleblower debrief. Probably lawyers with questions and government folks who wanted statements. But that was later. This was now. I had everything I needed. Every log, every timestamp, every breadcrumb, and Kyle had exactly what he deserved. Turns out some dogs train themselves to walk straight into the trap. I just held the leash. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit him.